Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure being here today. I'm your Master of Ceremonies, Jan Scruggs, President of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Excuse me, but at this time we are going to have the color guard post the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Military District of Washington will be posting the colors. The Military District of Washington, please post the colors. This is a joint service color guard, which has a representative of each member of the armed services, and we're very proud to have them here. Once they are in position, we will uh, hear our national anthem. At that conclusion of that, we will retire the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem. Hey, Sergeant, please retire the colors. We're very appreciative of the Military District of Washington and giving us the opportunity to have this color guard. They really add so much to the ceremonies and special events, and they're very busy with many other events here in Washington, but we're very lucky to have gotten them. So I'm Jan Scruggs, founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the organization authorized by Congress to build this memorial, which was dedicated in 1982. It's commonly known as the Wall, and the Wall stands behind us as a symbol of our nation's honor and recognition of the service and sacrifices of members of the armed forces who served during the Vietnam War, and the nation owes a great deal of respect to everybody who served in all of our nation's wars. And today, as always, we especially recognize the people serving today in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places where our soldiers and sailors and Marines are putting their lives in jeopardy for our country. We are here today to commemorate a rather solemn occasion because on this date, 50 years ago, two men lost their lives in a country that most of us here in the United States had never heard of at the time. The name of the country is Vietnam. The deaths of U.S. Army military advisors Major Dale Buis and Master Sergeant Chester Obnand marked the beginning of a lengthy war, and which became a very divisive event for our society. The war raged for many years. It would claim the lives of more than 58,000 members of the U.S. Armed Forces and estimates of 1.5 million, 2 million Vietnamese. This was a very massive event. Controversy will probably always surround the war itself, but the Vietnam Veterans Memorial has ensured that those who served and those who gave their lives are not forgotten. As we began this project back in 1979, it was our mantra to separate the war from the warrior, to keep the two as separate issues, honoring the service of people is something important and that we as a nation must do and will always do. With the recent passing of former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, the political and military decisions during the Vietnam War are once again being debated. Yet today we are here to reflect and honor the individuals who paid the supreme sacrifice in service to our country and carrying out its policies. The first speaker today is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Stanley Carnow. On July 8, 1959, Mr. Carnow was in Saigon covering Asia for Time magazine. He reported on the deaths of Major Buis, Master Sergeant Obnand from the scene, and Mr. Carnow reported on the war from 1959 through the 60s, 70s. His book is really the one book that people read, Vietnam: A History, made into a series by WGBH. He also wrote Paris in the 50s, one of the most enjoyable little summer reads for anyone, and won a Pulitzer Prize, a book about the U.S. Involvement in the Philippines. So, ladies and gentlemen, Stanley Carnow, a graduate of Harvard University and a veteran of World War II. He was in Burma, China, and India in the United States Army in World War II. Ladies and gentlemen, Stanley Carnow.
The way Jan tells my life, I was with Washington at Valley Forge, I was with Grant at Vicksburg, and so forth. I had been a reporter in Europe and covering Europe and North Africa, a little bit of the Middle East, when someone stuck a pin in a map, one of my editors in New York for Time magazine, and said, okay, we're going to transfer you to Asia. So off I went with my wife to Hong Kong. And the territory I had to cover was Southeast Asia. And I went down to Saigon just to look around when I heard that some incident had taken place at a South Vietnamese army camp about 25 miles north of the city, a place called Bien Hoa. So I jumped into a taxi and drove up there in the cab and got there to discover that two Americans, Jan mentioned their names, Buis and Ovnan, had been, during a break in their duties, watching a movie in probably a dining room or something at the camp when two guerrillas or terrorists or whatever, we presume they were communists, but we weren't sure, they probably were, stuck their machine guns inside the windows and sprayed the place, and they were killed. A couple of other officers went up there to see what happened. You'll hear more about that later. Anyway, of course, I was quite astonished, but here I was, I'm not claiming to have been a hero of any sort, but I'd been around wars for a while. So the idea of a couple of guys getting killed in a remote place that nobody's ever heard of in America struck me as an interesting story, and I filed my dispatch to Time magazine. Now, when it came out in the magazine, it was boiled down to about 3 paragraphs, and that's all it was worth. I mean, it was just a minor incident in a faraway place, and that's it. I didn't even have a signature on the piece. Those days, time stories were anonymous. And so there I was. And of course, here I was at the beginning of one of America's major, longest wars, America's first defeat in its history, a war that was going to wake up Americans and remind them that we're not all John Waynes, that we don't win everything, and so forth. And I went on covering the war, as Jan mentioned, until the end. I've been back to Vietnam several times. And it was always an honor to be asked to come out here and speak about this. And in a way, I could say, well, I was a lucky reporter. I happened to be there when something happened. I've had a lot of experiences of being at historic occasions, which at the time they occurred, I did not know were historic. I won't go into these things, but I've been in other wars and other situations. So there's not much more to me to say, and I want you to listen to some of the other people who have something more to say about it. And I want to congratulate Jan, as I have several times. It's inflated his ego terribly to tell him what a great job he's done in getting the wall built and defending the wall against critics and others. So thank you for listening to me, and carry on, Captain or Sergeant. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. Specialist fourth class corporal, actually, but that was way back when. And Mr. Carnow, as well, I believe, achieved the rank of corporal in the United States Army. So I'm in very, very good company. We also want to especially recognize some of the special guests here today. We're very thankful for the partnership and friendship we have with the AFL-CIO and Mr. Sweeney. Everyone in the organization has been helping us, but we have here three people, Mr. Greg Woodhead, Gordon Pavey, and Brian Charlton as well, but they're very much involved in helping us with the underground visitor center at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which will, of course, be built with union labor. It is always worth getting the best labor possible, and we are very appreciative for their effort. So what I'd like to do at this time is introduce to you Captain Nathaniel Ward. The fourth. U.S. Army retired. He was wounded, but he is a Vietnam veteran. But his father, Nathaniel Ward III, was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army Military Advisory Group, a group of soldiers coordinating the very limited military activities taking place in Vietnam at the time. And his dad was in charge of that from 1958 to 1960. So Colonel Ward and Captain Nathaniel Ward, who was a teenager at the time, enjoying Saigon because it was just a great place to be, and he was dating a lovely woman from France, and it was just kind of a great life, which slowly began getting less and less enjoyable. He knew Major Buis, Master Sergeant Obnand, who was really just a month away from retiring, and he had put his 20 years in and was going to move on with his life. And Captain Ward also worked with the Mekong Educational Foundation to locate the relatives of the two men in the mid-'80s. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Nathaniel Ward, U.S. Army, retired.
Thank you. I know you want to hear more about the French girl. Yeah. We were living over there, my sister and I, during the time that these events took place in the early MAG days. And I remember Dad coming home one night in a tizzy and changing into his fatigues. And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "They've ambushed the outpost at Benoit and killed a few." And I said, "Cool, I'll go with you." And he said, "No, you just keep marching right here." And I kind of shrugged it off and went out with a French girl, never thought much of it. And after talking about this, I asked my sister, I said, "Do you remember what happened that night?" And she said, "Yeah, we were all sleeping. We got a phone call in the middle of the night." And I said, No. Dad came home, 7, 8 o'clock and changed." She said, "No, it wasn't." And we figured out that was probably the attacking one of the imperial palaces. So last night I called Ray Bose, who's written several books on Vietnam and has really established the lore of it. And I said, what time were Buis and Ovnan killed? And he looked it up and said about 7. The first film ran, killed about 7:30. I said, thank you. So I don't listen to my sister's memory. I have to stick with my own. After we left Vietnam, when Jan got the idea to do the wall, to establish the wall, DOD started looking back at what names would begin there, and I think they were looking at an Army captain from '61, and Dad was retired down in Hampton. He said, no, we can go a little earlier than that. So he petitioned for about a year, and they finally agreed to go with Major Buis and Sergeant Ovnan. We tried to find their families later on in the mid-'80s, and Ovnan's family trail went dead in Texas. He had no kids, no family, nothing. Of course, we didn't have the Google and the internet in the early '80s, but we did find Major Buis's sole remaining son living right in San Diego in our backyard almost. And I spent some time with him talking about his thoughts about the wall and the incidences. And I don't know if he's been back out here, but so I'm kind of standing in the shoes of my father, who's standing in the shoes of Major Buis and Sergeant Ovnan, that became a part of history when they never intended to. And I'm glad that we're able to honor these two and the rest of the 58,000 that are also here. I know there are probably a lot of names on the wall who never get visited. I'm sure there are soldiers up there that don't have any families to even think about them. So it's good that we can bring some attention to it, some PR, and raise some funds for the educational center. Thank you. Jan, thanks very much.
Yeah, they were the weapon used by the Viet Cong National Liberation Front was a .32 caliber weapon called a French MAB machine gun. So it was a submachine gun that was actually manufactured in France and probably captured from a French unit. The other weapon was a bomb which actually exploded. Major Buis, even though they were unarmed, the bomb exploded and killed one of the Viet Cong guys as well as Major Buis. Well, the final speaker today is Major Sam Ratcliffe, 1965 graduate and former commandant, teacher, coach of the Wentworth Military Academy, which is located in Lexington, Missouri. Major Buis, 1942 graduate, is one of the 13 Wentworth graduates remembered on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and today hundreds of graduates of Wentworth are in Iraq and Afghanistan. He served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 5th Special Forces Group, the Green Berets, and the MACV Ranger Command. Major Ratcliffe is accompanied today by fellow Wentworth alumni Bob Matkin, Dennis Large, Mark Mullenioux, all of whom are veterans of the Vietnam era, as well as the current student captain, Joel Fowler. So at this time, I'm going to introduce to you Major Sam Ratcliffe.
It is our pleasure to be here today on behalf of Wentworth Military Academy and our Superintendent, Colonel Bill Sellers, to honor not only Major Buis and the other Wentworth graduates who are on the wall. Major Buis came to Wentworth from Nebraska in 1938, and as mentioned by Jan, he graduated in 1942. I find that rather ironic because that was the year I was born. On this date in 1959, I was still in high school at Wentworth, and we were living in the memories of our World War I, World War II, and Korean graduates who had made the sacrifice. And it wasn't until years later when we were able to put a monument, thanks to one of our graduates, Representative Ike Skelton, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, of a helicopter on our campus commemorating some of the other Wentworth graduates, one of which received the Medal of Honor as a helicopter pilot. But we came today because as a small private military school, high school and junior college located in a small town outside of Kansas City, we're rather proud of who we are and what we are, and particularly of our graduates, not only those who have been captains of industry and business and government, but as Jan said, who have made that ultimate sacrifice with others. Major Buis is rather special to us somewhat ironic because of the alphabetical chronological listing on the wall. I know I would have come today if you all hadn't have been here, because I come to the wall frequently and I visit the traveling wall and I look at the names of the Wentworth men that I knew, and they're not just names on the wall. And I ask you, when you go to the wall, those names were people, were men, women, who were fathers and sons, nephews, cousins, and friends. As Jan said, the shame of it is many people don't get to visit it. I'm going to look at those other 13 names today. I'm going to look at the names of the men that I served with. But there again, it is our pleasure as graduates of this small private military school located in the heart of the Missouri River Valley to come to honor one of our men who every one of you have seen his name because it happens to be the first one. I'm joined today, as Jan said, by other graduates and a current student from Wentworth. And I'd like them to join me right now because they're going to present a flag of Wentworth Military Academy that we're going to leave at the wall as our memento not only to Major Buis, but to the other Wentworth graduates whose names are on the wall. Mr. Mullenioux is with me, Mark Mullenioux. He has a son who will be deploying to Iraq next week. Also, Dennis Large is here. He served in Vietnam with the Marine Corps. Mr. Bob Matkin, a Marine who served in the Vietnam Era. And I said Cadet Joel Fowler, a recent graduate of Wentworth who is still attending Wentworth before he goes on to medical school at the University of Minnesota next year. So this is one of our flags that we carry at our ceremonies with our color guard, and we want to leave it as a memento, particularly to Major Buis, but to also the other Wentworth men. I mentioned that Mark Mullenioux has a son deploying next week. I currently have a son in Iraq. It was 110 degrees in Baghdad today, I noticed. It's about 1,600 over there in the evening, so maybe it's getting cooler. I've had one other son who's been in Iraq twice and Afghanistan twice. And I hope that someday the men that they served with are honored by a wonderful monument such as the one we have behind us, thanks to Jan and his friends.